Question 1. Strategic planning requires Angarsk State Technical University to consider the introduction of a new interdisciplinary master's program. Which of the following approaches best ensures the program's successful and compliant integration into the university's offerings? Option A. Developing the program based on faculty interest alone, assuming that academic excellence will automatically satisfy all external requirements and internal policies. Option B. Conducting a thorough impact assessment that evaluates the program's alignment with the university's strategic objectives, financial feasibility, resource requirements, and compliance with Russian federal education laws and university charter. Option C. Implementing the program with minimal initial investment, focusing on a phased rollout that avoids upfront costs and allows for adjustments based on student feedback, without a formal pre-launch impact analysis. Option D. Prioritizing the program's potential to attract high tuition fees and immediately launching it to capitalize on perceived market demand, deferring regulatory checks until after enrollment. Correct answer is B. Conducting a thorough impact assessment that evaluates the program's alignment with the university's strategic objectives, financial feasibility, resource requirements, and compliance with Russian federal education laws and university charter. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in strategic planning within an educational institution like Angarsk State Technical University, balancing the need for innovation and program development with the constraints of regulatory compliance and resource allocation. The professional challenge lies in identifying a strategic direction that is both forward-looking and feasible within the established legal and operational framework of the university. Careful judgment is required to ensure that proposed initiatives align with the university's mission, the demands of the educational sector, and the specific requirements of Russian higher education regulations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically evaluates the potential consequences of a new program on various aspects of the university. This includes analyzing its alignment with the university's strategic goals, its financial viability, its effect on existing academic programs, and crucially, its compliance with the federal law on education in the Russian Federation and the university's own charter and internal regulations. This approach ensures that decisions are informed, risk-mitigated, and ethically sound, prioritizing the long-term sustainability and quality of education provided by Angarsk State Technical University. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on market demand, without considering regulatory approval processes, would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the legal framework governing higher education in Russia, which mandates specific accreditation and licensing procedures for new educational programs. Another incorrect approach, prioritizing immediate cost savings over the long-term educational impact, would also be flawed. This overlooks the ethical obligation to provide high-quality education and could lead to the development of programs that are unsustainable or do not meet the required academic standards, potentially violating principles of academic integrity and institutional responsibility. A third incorrect approach, which involves implementing a program without consulting relevant university departments and stakeholders, risks creating internal conflict and operational inefficiencies, failing to adhere to principles of good governance and collaborative decision-making expected within a university setting. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the strategic objective. This is followed by identifying all relevant internal and external constraints, including legal, financial, and operational factors. The next step involves generating multiple potential solutions or program ideas. For each idea, a thorough impact assessment, considering regulatory compliance, resource availability, and alignment with strategic goals, must be conducted. Finally, the most viable and compliant option should be selected based on this comprehensive evaluation, ensuring transparency and adherence to established university procedures. Question 2. During the evaluation of an applicant's submitted documents for the Angarsk State Technical University entrance exam, the admissions committee discovers a minor discrepancy in the formatting of one of the supporting academic transcripts, which is otherwise complete and authentic. The university's regulations for the entrance exam do not explicitly detail procedures for such minor formatting issues. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and professional standards for this exam? Option A. Reject the application immediately due to the formatting issue, citing a failure to adhere to submission guidelines as per the general principles of academic rigor. Option B. Consider the applicant's strong performance in other parts of the application and the potential of their future academic contributions to the university, and admit them despite the transcript formatting issue. Option C. Contact the applicant to request a corrected transcript, providing a reasonable deadline for submission, and then proceed with the evaluation once the corrected document is received. Option D. Proceed with the evaluation of the applicant's qualifications based on the content of the transcript, while noting the formatting discrepancy internally, and if the applicant is otherwise qualified, proceed with admission. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the evaluation of the applicant's qualifications based on the content of the transcript, while noting the formatting discrepancy internally, and if the applicant is otherwise qualified, proceed with admission. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's academic integrity with the need to provide a fair and transparent admissions process. The admissions committee must adhere strictly to the Angarsk State Technical University's established entrance examination regulations, which are designed to ensure a standardized and objective assessment of candidates. Failure to follow these regulations can lead to accusations of bias, unfairness, and ultimately compromise the credibility of the university's admissions. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the candidate's submitted documentation against the specific criteria outlined in the Angarsk State Technical University entrance exam regulations. This includes verifying the authenticity of academic records, ensuring all required application components are present, and confirming that the candidate meets the minimum eligibility requirements as stipulated by the university for the chosen program. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the regulatory framework governing the entrance exam, prioritizing adherence to established rules and procedures to maintain fairness and objectivity. The regulations are the sole authority in this context, and any deviation would be a violation. An incorrect approach would be to make an exception based on the candidate's perceived potential or external recommendations, without a clear basis in the university's regulations. This is incorrect because it bypasses the established, objective criteria set forth by the Angarsk State Technical University entrance exam regulations. Such an action introduces subjectivity and potential bias, undermining the principle of equal opportunity for all applicants. It also fails to uphold the integrity of the examination process, as it suggests that rules can be bent or ignored for certain individuals. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the application solely based on a minor administrative oversight that is not explicitly disqualifying according to the regulation, without offering the candidate an opportunity to rectify it. This is incorrect because it demonstrates a lack of adherence to the spirit of fairness and due process that should be inherent in any examination process. While regulations must be followed, a rigid interpretation that penalizes minor, correctable errors without due consideration for the candidate's overall qualifications and the intent of the regulations can be seen as overly punitive and not in line with best practices for a fair assessment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of the Angarsk State Technical University entrance exam regulations. First, identify the specific requirements for the application and admission. Second, meticulously compare the candidate's submission against these requirements. Third, if any discrepancies or ambiguities arise, consult the relevant sections of the regulations or seek clarification from the designated examination authority within the university. Finally, make a decision that is demonstrably and solely based on the established regulatory framework, ensuring transparency and fairness for all applicants. Question 3. Strategic planning requires a systematic evaluation of potential initiatives to ensure alignment with the university's mission, regulatory obligations, and regional development goals. Which of the following approaches best embodies this principle for Angarsk State Technical University? Option A. Relying on informal consultations with a few senior faculty members and anecdotal evidence of successful projects at similar institutions to guide strategic decisions. Option B. Focusing exclusively on adopting strategies that have proven successful in leading international universities, regardless of their applicability to the specific context of Angarsk State Technical University or Russian regulations. Option C. Prioritizing initiatives that offer the quickest and highest potential for immediate financial return, even if their long-term educational implications are not fully understood. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes how proposed strategies will affect educational quality, research output, student outcomes, and compliance with Russian Federation laws on education and university governance, while also considering regional socio-economic needs. The correct answer is D. Conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes how proposed strategies will affect educational quality, research output, student outcomes, and compliance with Russian Federation laws on education and university governance, while also considering regional socio-economic needs. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the university's strategic planning process must align with the specific regulatory framework governing higher education institutions in the Russian Federation, as mandated by the Angarsk State Technical University Entrance Exam Guidelines. The challenge lies in identifying an approach that not only reflects sound strategic thinking, but also adheres strictly to these legal and educational standards, ensuring the university's long-term viability and compliance. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between general business strategy principles and the specific legal and educational mandates applicable to a state technical university. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers the university's mission, educational objectives, and the socio-economic context of its region, all within the framework of Russian federal laws on education, university charters, and relevant government decrees. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the need to evaluate how proposed strategic initiatives will affect the university's core functions, its students, faculty, and its contribution to regional development, while ensuring adherence to all applicable legal requirements. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of responsible governance and the pursuit of educational excellence as enshrined in Russian higher education legislation, an approach that prioritizes immediate financial gains without a thorough evaluation of its impact on educational quality or regulatory compliance is incorrect. This would likely violate principles of academic integrity and potentially contravene regulations concerning the allocation of resources for educational purposes. Focusing solely on international rankings without considering the specific needs and regulatory environment of Angarsk State Technical University is also incorrect. Such a narrow focus might lead to strategies that are not sustainable or relevant within the Russian higher education system and could overlook critical domestic regulatory obligations. Furthermore, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or trends from unrelated institutions, without rigorous analysis of their applicability and legal feasibility within the university's specific context, is professionally unsound and ethically questionable, as it risks making decisions based on incomplete or inappropriate information, potentially leading to noncompliance with established educational standards and legal frameworks. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the governing regulatory framework. This involves identifying all relevant laws, decrees, and internal university statutes. Subsequently, they should define the strategic objectives in alignment with these regulations and the university's mission. The next step is to systematically assess potential strategic initiatives against these objectives and regulatory requirements, using impact assessment methodologies that consider educational, social, financial, and legal dimensions. Finally, decisions should be made based on a comprehensive evaluation of these assessments, prioritizing compliance, educational quality, and long-term sustainability. Question 4. Performance analysis shows that to better assess the suitability of candidates for specialized technical programs at Angarsk State Technical University, admissions officers are considering various methods to gather additional insights beyond submitted documents. Which of the following approaches represents the most appropriate and compliant method for impact assessment of potential applicants? Option A. Analyzing the applicant's personal social media accounts to understand their lifestyle and social circles for potential cultural fit. Option B. Reviewing publicly available professional profiles and the applicant's submitted academic and extracurricular records, cross-referencing information for consistency with program requirements. Option C. Soliciting informal opinions from acquaintances of the applicant who are not officially part of the admissions committee. Without verifying their information, Option D. Contacting the applicant's current employer to discuss their work performance and perceived aptitude for a technical field without prior applicant consent. The correct answer is B. Reviewing publicly available professional profiles and the applicant's submitted academic and extracurricular records, cross-referencing information for consistency with program requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the boundaries of permissible information gathering within the Angarsk State Technical University's entrance exam framework, specifically concerning the impact assessment of potential applicants. Misinterpreting these boundaries can lead to violations of privacy regulations or unfair advantages, undermining the integrity of the entrance process. The correct approach involves a systematic and authorized review of publicly available information and the applicant's submitted materials, strictly adhering to the Angarsk State Technical University's admission policies and relevant Russian Federation educational regulations. This approach is professionally sound because it respects the applicant's right to privacy while still allowing for a comprehensive evaluation based on legitimate criteria. It aligns with the principles of fairness and transparency expected in academic admissions, ensuring that all applicants are assessed on the same, authorized basis. The regulatory justification stems from the need to comply with data protection laws and university-specific admission guidelines, which typically outline what information can be collected and how it can be used for evaluation purposes. An incorrect approach that involves directly contacting the applicant's current employer to inquire about their performance and suitability for a technical program without the applicant's explicit consent is ethically and regulatorily flawed. This action constitutes an invasion of privacy and potentially violates labor laws and data protection regulations in the Russian Federation. It bypasses established channels for information verification and could lead to the disclosure of confidential employment details. Another incorrect approach, such as accessing the applicant's social media profiles to glean personal information unrelated to their academic or professional qualifications, is also problematic. While social media is often considered public, using information gleaned from it for admission decisions can be seen as intrusive and may not be a reliable or fair basis for assessment. It also risks introducing bias into the evaluation process, which is contrary to the principles of merit-based admissions. A third incorrect approach, which is to rely solely on informal recommendations from individuals who may have personal biases, without independent verification or adherence to university-defined assessment criteria, is professionally unsound. This method lacks objectivity and can lead to an unfair evaluation, potentially overlooking more qualified candidates or favoring those with personal connections. It fails to meet the standards of due diligence and evidence-based assessment required by academic institutions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's admission policies, relevant data protection laws, such as those within the Russian Federation, and ethical guidelines. Professionals should always prioritize authorized and transparent methods of information gathering. When in doubt about the permissibility of an action, seeking clarification from supervisors or the relevant university department is crucial. The focus should always be on collecting information that is directly relevant to the assessment criteria and obtained through legitimate and ethical means. Question 5. Strategic planning requires the Angarsk State Technical University to consider changes to its entrance examination process. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical considerations for a state technical university in the Russian Federation when evaluating such changes? Option A. Implementing changes based on feedback from a small group of faculty members who believe the current exam is too difficult, without a broader evaluation of its impact on the applicant pool. Option B. Adopting examination formats and content that are popular in other countries, assuming they will automatically improve the quality of admitted students without considering local educational context or regulatory requirements. Option C. Prioritizing the reduction of examination administration costs by streamlining the process, even if it means limiting the number of examination centers or reducing the availability of support services for candidates. Option D. Conducting a thorough impact assessment that analyzes potential effects on candidate access, fairness, and alignment with national educational standards, involving relevant stakeholders in the review process. The correct answer is D. Conducting a thorough impact assessment that analyzes potential effects on candidate access, fairness, and alignment with national educational standards, involving relevant stakeholders in the review process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Angarsk State Technical University, as an educational institution, must adhere to specific national regulations and internal university guidelines regarding the development and implementation of its entrance examination strategy. The challenge lies in balancing the university's strategic goals for student recruitment and academic quality with the legal and ethical obligations governing fair and transparent admissions processes. A robust impact assessment is crucial to ensure that any proposed changes to the entrance exam strategy do not inadvertently create barriers for eligible candidates, violate anti-discrimination laws, or undermine the university's accreditation. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically evaluates the potential consequences of the proposed changes on various stakeholders, including prospective students, current students, faculty, and the university's reputation. This assessment must consider not only the direct effects on exam content and format, but also indirect effects such as accessibility, fairness, and alignment with the university's educational mission and the requirements of the Russian Federation's Ministry of Science and Higher Education. Such an assessment ensures that decisions are evidence-based, legally compliant, and ethically sound, promoting equitable access to higher education. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on perceived administrative efficiency without considering the broader implications would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the regulatory framework that mandates fairness and non-discrimination in educational admissions. For instance, prioritizing cost reduction over ensuring adequate accessibility for candidates with disabilities would violate Russian federal laws protecting the rights of individuals with disabilities and the principles of inclusive education. Another incorrect approach that bypasses a thorough impact assessment in favor of immediate implementation based on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a select few would also be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This approach neglects the due diligence required by university governance and educational policy, potentially leading to unintended negative consequences that could jeopardize the university's standing and lead to legal challenges. It fails to demonstrate the responsible stewardship of public trust and resources expected of a state technical university. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the strategic objective, followed by a thorough review of relevant legislation and university policies. The next step is to design and execute a comprehensive impact assessment, considering all potential positive and negative outcomes. Based on the findings of this assessment, a reasoned decision can be made, with clear justification and mitigation strategies for any identified risks. This process ensures accountability, transparency, and adherence to the highest professional and regulatory standards. Question 6. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need to review the Angarsk State Technical University entrance examination process to better align with evolving admission standards and resource allocation. Which approach best addresses this feedback while upholding the university's commitment to fair and effective admissions? Option A. Implement immediate changes to the exam format based on the opinions of the admissions committee to streamline administrative processes and reduce costs. Option B. Rely on historical data from previous years' exams to make minor adjustments without consulting external stakeholders. Option C. Prioritize the introduction of new question types that are perceived as more challenging, without a formal evaluation of their impact on applicant diversity or accessibility. Option D. Conduct a thorough impact assessment involving all key stakeholder groups to identify potential consequences of proposed changes on applicants, faculty, and administrative staff, and to develop strategies for mitigation and enhancement. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough impact assessment involving all key stakeholder groups to identify potential consequences of proposed changes on applicants, faculty, and administrative staff, and to develop strategies for mitigation and enhancement. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's strategic goals with the immediate concerns and potential impacts on various stakeholder groups. The entrance exam process is a critical touchpoint for prospective students, their families, and the university's reputation. A failure to adequately consider the impact of changes can lead to dissatisfaction, reduced applicant numbers, and damage to the university's standing. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any modifications to the exam are both effective in achieving the university's objectives and fair to the applicants. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically identifies potential consequences for all relevant stakeholders. This approach is professionally sound because it aligns with the principles of responsible institutional management and ethical decision-making, which are implicitly expected in the context of a university's operational framework. By proactively analyzing potential effects, the university can anticipate challenges, mitigate negative outcomes, and develop strategies to maximize benefits. This aligns with the spirit of continuous improvement and stakeholder engagement, which are vital for long-term institutional success. While specific regulations for Angarsk State Technical University entrance exams are not provided, the general principles of good governance and ethical conduct in educational institutions necessitate such a thorough and inclusive assessment process. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the university's immediate administrative convenience would be professionally unacceptable. This would fail to acknowledge the significant impact on prospective students, potentially leading to perceptions of unfairness or a lack of consideration, which could deter future applicants. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost reduction without considering the quality or accessibility of the exam would also be ethically flawed. This could inadvertently disadvantage certain groups of applicants or compromise the integrity of the assessment process. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a narrow group without systematic data collection would lack the rigor necessary for informed decision-making and could lead to poorly conceived changes. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the objectives of any proposed changes. This should be followed by identifying all relevant stakeholders and their potential interests and concerns. A systematic impact assessment, considering both positive and negative consequences across different dimensions, e.g., accessibility, fairness, administrative burden, reputational impact, is then crucial. This assessment should inform the development of mitigation strategies and communication plans. Finally, a review and feedback mechanism should be established to monitor the effectiveness of the changes and make further adjustments as needed. Question 7. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of technical glitches during the online submission of application documents and a high likelihood of applicants misunderstanding specific eligibility criteria. Which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework for Angarsk State Technical University entrance examinations? Option A. Allocate resources to address the moderate likelihood of technical glitches, while considering the high likelihood of eligibility misunderstandings as a secondary concern. Option B. Implement a mandatory in-person review of all application documents to eliminate any risk of submission errors. Option C. Prioritize developing robust backup systems for online submissions and creating a detailed FAQ document addressing all potential eligibility queries. Option D. Focus all mitigation efforts on preventing any possibility of technical glitches, as this is a direct operational risk. The correct answer is C. Prioritize developing robust backup systems for online submissions and creating a detailed FAQ document addressing all potential eligibility queries. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of how to interpret and act upon risk assessment data within the specific context of Angarsk State Technical University's entrance examination regulations. The challenge lies in moving beyond a simple identification of risks to a strategic and compliant response that prioritizes the integrity and fairness of the examination process. A superficial approach could lead to either overreaction, unnecessarily complicating the process, or underreaction, potentially compromising the examination's validity. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for robust risk mitigation with the practicalities of administering a large-scale entrance exam. The correct approach involves a systematic impact assessment that considers the potential consequences of identified risks on the examination's fairness, validity, and operational efficiency. strictly adhering to Angarsk State Technical University's internal guidelines and relevant Russian Federation educational regulations governing entrance examinations. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the potential ramifications of each risk, allowing for targeted and proportionate mitigation strategies. By evaluating the severity and likelihood of each risk's impact, the university can prioritize resources and implement measures that are most effective in safeguarding the examination's integrity, aligning with the overarching regulatory framework that mandates fair and transparent admission processes. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the likelihood of a risk occurring without considering its potential impact would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of comprehensive risk analysis, which is a fundamental requirement in regulatory compliance. Without assessing the consequences, mitigation efforts might be misdirected or insufficient, potentially leaving critical vulnerabilities unaddressed. Another incorrect approach, which involves implementing broad, unspecific control measures for every identified risk regardless of its potential impact, is also professionally flawed. This demonstrates a misunderstanding of efficient risk management principles. Such an approach can lead to unnecessary expenditure of resources, administrative burden, and potentially create new operational risks without effectively addressing the most significant threats. It fails to demonstrate the reasoned judgment expected when applying regulatory frameworks, which often emphasize proportionality and effectiveness. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This begins with identifying potential risks relevant to the examination process. Subsequently, each identified risk must be analyzed for its likelihood, and crucially, its potential impact on key examination objectives such as fairness, validity, security, and operational continuity. Based on this impact assessment, risks are prioritized. Finally, appropriate mitigation strategies are developed and implemented, with ongoing monitoring and review to ensure their effectiveness and compliance with all applicable regulations. This systematic process ensures that decisions are data-driven, proportionate, and aligned with the overarching goals of the examination and the regulatory environment. Question 8. The assessment process reveals that an applicant for the Angarsk State Technical University's engineering program has a strong academic record in mathematics and physics, but a slightly lower score in a humanities subject compared to the stated minimum requirement. The applicant also presents a compelling portfolio of personal projects demonstrating practical engineering aptitude. Considering the regulatory framework of the Russian Federation concerning higher education admissions and the internal admission rules of Angarsk State Technical University, which approach to evaluating this applicant's admissibility is most appropriate? Option A. Reject the applicant outright due to the failure to meet the minimum score in the humanities subject, as per the strict interpretation of the admission criteria. Option B. Request additional standardized test scores in humanities subjects to compensate for the lower score, even though this is not a standard part of the published admission requirements. Option C. Prioritize the applicant's score in the humanities subject above all other factors, as it is explicitly listed as a minimum requirement. Option D. Consider the applicant's overall academic profile, including their strong performance in core engineering subjects and their demonstrated practical aptitude through personal projects, in conjunction with the humanities score, to make a holistic admission decision. Correct answer is A. Reject the applicant outright due to the failure to meet the minimum score in the humanities subject, as per the strict interpretation of the admission criteria. Explanation. The assessment process for Angarsk State Technical University entrance exams presents a unique challenge due to the need to balance the university's academic standards with the principles of fairness and transparency mandated by Russian educational regulations. Specifically, the federal law on education in the Russian Federation, Federalny Zakon Ot 29, 12, 2012 N 273 FC, and the internal charter and admission rules of Angarsk State Technical University are the primary governing documents. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying these regulations to diverse applicant profiles, ensuring that the assessment accurately reflects an applicant's potential without introducing bias or compromising the integrity of the admission process. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the applicant's submitted documentation, including academic records, extracurricular achievements, and any supplementary materials, against the established admission criteria. This approach aligns with Article 55 of the Federal Law on Education, which emphasizes the right to education and non-discriminatory admission based on merit. Furthermore, it adheres to the university's internal admission regulations, which are designed to ensure a fair and objective evaluation of candidates. This method prioritizes a holistic understanding of the applicant's qualifications and potential contribution to the university, fostering an environment of equal opportunity. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on a single aspect of an applicant's profile, such as a minor discrepancy in documentation, without considering the overall strength of their application. This could lead to an unfair exclusion of a potentially strong candidate, violating the spirit of inclusive education and potentially contravening Article 55 of the Federal Law on Education. Another incorrect approach would be to deviate from the published admission criteria based on subjective impressions or external pressures. This undermines the transparency and predictability of the admission process, which is crucial for maintaining public trust and adhering to the university's charter. Such actions could be seen as a breach of administrative procedure and a failure to uphold the principles of objective evaluation. Professionals involved in the assessment process should adopt a structured decision-making framework. This begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant Russian federal laws and the specific admission regulations of Angarsk State Technical University. They must then systematically evaluate each applicant against these established criteria, documenting the rationale for their decisions. In cases of ambiguity or borderline applications, seeking clarification from senior admissions officers or relevant university committees is essential. This process ensures that decisions are not only compliant with regulations, but also ethically sound and professionally defensible, prioritizing fairness and academic excellence. Question 9. The performance metrics show a significant surge in applications for the new advanced robotics and artificial intelligence engineering programs at Angarsk State Technical University, indicating a strong student interest. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation, while adhering to the principles of responsible academic development and resource management within the context of Russian higher education regulations? Option A. Focus on marketing and student recruitment for these programs, deferring any significant investment in infrastructure or faculty development until enrollment numbers are confirmed. Option B. Prioritize the recruitment of additional faculty solely based on the number of applicants, without a rigorous assessment of their specific qualifications in the advanced fields of robotics and AI. Option C. Initiate a thorough impact assessment to evaluate the university's capacity in terms of faculty expertise, laboratory facilities, library resources, and administrative support before determining appropriate enrollment levels. Option D. Immediately approve a substantial increase in student quotas for these programs to capitalize on the high demand and projected tuition revenue. Correct answer is D. Immediately approve a substantial increase in student quotas for these programs to capitalize on the high demand and projected tuition revenue. Explanation. The performance metrics show a significant increase in student enrollment in specialized engineering programs at Angarsk State Technical University. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the university administration to balance the immediate demand for these programs with the long-term sustainability and quality of education. A hasty expansion without proper resource allocation could lead to overcrowded classrooms, insufficient faculty expertise, and a decline in the overall academic standard, potentially impacting the university's reputation and its ability to meet its educational mission. Careful judgment is required to ensure that growth is managed responsibly and ethically. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates the potential consequences of increased enrollment across all relevant university functions. This includes assessing the capacity of existing infrastructure, laboratories, lecture halls, libraries, the availability and qualifications of faculty, the adequacy of administrative support, and the financial implications. This approach aligns with the principles of responsible institutional management and the ethical obligation to provide a high-quality educational experience, as implicitly expected by the regulatory framework governing higher education institutions in the Russian Federation, which emphasizes the importance of maintaining educational standards and efficient resource utilization. An incorrect approach would be to immediately approve a large increase in student intake for these popular programs without any prior evaluation. This fails to consider the strain on resources and could lead to a dilution of educational quality, violating the implicit commitment to academic excellence. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize revenue generation from increased enrollment over educational quality, potentially leading to the hiring of underqualified adjunct faculty or the neglect of essential infrastructure upgrades. This would be ethically questionable and could contravene regulations that mandate the provision of adequate learning conditions. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the perceived demand, without considering the long-term employability of graduates or the university's capacity to support specialized research and development in these fields, potentially leading to an unsustainable program offering. Professionals in university administration should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core issue, increased enrollment demand. This should be followed by a thorough analysis of potential impacts, considering both positive and negative consequences. The next step involves evaluating various strategic options against established institutional goals and regulatory requirements. Finally, a decision should be made based on the option that best balances growth with the preservation and enhancement of educational quality and institutional integrity, ensuring compliance with all applicable Russian Federation higher education regulations. Question 10. Investigation of the potential environmental and socio-economic consequences of a proposed new industrial facility near Angarsk, focusing on the methodologies for assessing its impact on local water resources and community well-being. Option A. Focusing primarily on the projected increase in local employment and tax revenue generated by the facility, assuming these economic benefits will outweigh any potential environmental concerns. Option B. Concluding that a full impact assessment is unnecessary due to the limited availability of pre-existing detailed environmental data for the specific site, and proceeding with the project based on general industry standards. Option C. Prioritizing the immediate concerns of local residents regarding noise pollution and traffic congestion, without undertaking a broader analysis of potential long-term environmental or economic effects. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive environmental and social impact assessment, ESA, that includes detailed hydrological studies, ecological surveys, and community consultations to identify, predict, and evaluate potential positive and negative effects, and proposing mitigation measures. The correct answer is D. Conducting a comprehensive environmental and social impact assessment, ESA, that includes detailed hydrological studies, ecological surveys, and community consultations to identify, predict, and evaluate potential positive and negative effects, and proposing mitigation measures. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for an applicant to Angarsk State Technical University's entrance exam, requiring them to understand the implications of a proposed infrastructure project on the local environment and community. The core professional challenge lies in balancing the potential benefits of the project with its potential negative impacts, necessitating a thorough and objective assessment. This requires careful judgment to ensure that decisions are informed by evidence and adhere to relevant regulations. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically identifies, analyzes, and evaluates the potential environmental, social, and economic consequences of the proposed project. This approach is justified by the principles of responsible development and the regulatory framework governing such projects, which mandate a proactive and thorough evaluation of potential harm. Adherence to these principles ensures that stakeholders are informed, mitigation strategies can be developed, and decisions are made in the public interest, aligning with the spirit of the Angarsk State Technical University's entrance exam, which likely values analytical and responsible thinking. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the economic benefits of the project fails to acknowledge the potential for significant environmental degradation and social disruption. This overlooks regulatory requirements that mandate consideration of all potential impacts, not just those that are financially advantageous. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate community concerns without a broader environmental or long-term economic perspective is also flawed, as it may lead to short-sighted decisions that do not serve the overall best interests of the region or comply with comprehensive impact assessment mandates. Finally, an approach that dismisses potential negative impacts due to a lack of readily available data, without proposing methods to gather such data, demonstrates a failure to meet the due diligence expected in impact assessment and a disregard for the precautionary principle, often embedded in environmental regulations. Professionals tasked with such assessments should employ a structured decision-making framework. This involves clearly defining the scope of the assessment, identifying all relevant stakeholders, gathering comprehensive data from diverse sources, analyzing potential impacts using established methodologies, developing appropriate mitigation and enhancement measures, and communicating findings transparently. This systematic process ensures that all facets of the proposed project are considered, leading to more robust and defensible recommendations. Question 11. Process analysis reveals that a technology company, a potential sponsor for Angarsk State Technical University's entrance examinations, has offered significant financial support in exchange for the opportunity to review and provide input on the technical content of the physics and mathematics sections of the exam. This input is framed as ensuring the questions are relevant to modern industry challenges. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation, in accordance with the principles of academic integrity and fairness expected of an educational institution? Option A. Agree to the sponsorship with the condition that the sponsor can provide general feedback on the curriculum, but not on specific exam questions, and proceed with the examination as planned without further detailed scrutiny of the sponsor's influence. Option B. Reject the sponsorship offer entirely to avoid any potential for conflict of interest, even if it means foregoing significant financial resources that could benefit the university's educational programs. Option C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify specific risks to exam integrity and fairness. Develop strict protocols to ensure the sponsor's input is advisory only and does not influence question selection or difficulty. And maintain full transparency with applicants about the sponsorship and the advisory nature of the sponsor's involvement. Option D. Accept the sponsorship and the sponsor's input, assuming that their intention is genuinely to improve the relevance of the exam, and rely on the examination committee's professional judgment to filter any potentially biased suggestions. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify specific risks to exam integrity and fairness. Develop strict protocols to ensure the sponsor's input is advisory only and does not influence question selection or difficulty, and maintain full transparency with applicants about the sponsorship and the advisory nature of the sponsor's involvement. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate need for funding and the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of the entrance examination process. The pressure to secure a sponsorship deal could lead to compromises that undermine fairness and transparency, which are fundamental principles of academic admissions. Careful judgment is required to balance institutional interests with the paramount importance of a credible and equitable examination. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that prioritizes the integrity of the entrance examination above all else. This means meticulously evaluating how any potential sponsorship agreement might influence the examination's content, administration, security, or the perception of fairness among applicants. The justification for this approach lies in the regulatory framework governing educational institutions, which mandates adherence to principles of academic integrity and equal opportunity. Specifically, the internal regulations of Angarsk State Technical University, as outlined in its charter and admission policies, would likely stipulate that all examination processes must be conducted impartially and without undue external influence. Any sponsorship that could be perceived as compromising this impartiality would violate these foundational principles and potentially lead to legal challenges or reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the sponsorship agreement without a comprehensive impact assessment, assuming that any potential conflicts can be managed later. This failure stems from a disregard for the proactive duty to uphold academic integrity. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a prioritization of financial gain over fairness. From a regulatory standpoint, it risks violating clauses within the university's own admission regulations that demand transparency and impartiality in all examination-related activities. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the sponsorship, but impose superficial measures to mitigate conflicts, such as a general statement of non-interference from the sponsor. This is professionally unacceptable because it fails to address the root causes of potential bias. The regulatory failure lies in not conducting a granular analysis of specific risks. For instance, If the sponsor is in a related industry, there's a risk of questions being tailored to their interests, or sensitive information about the exam's difficulty or format being leaked. Ethically, this approach is disingenuous, as it creates an illusion of integrity without substantive safeguards. A third incorrect approach would be to reject the sponsorship outright, without exploring potential avenues for collaboration that would not compromise the examination's integrity. While caution is warranted, a complete refusal might overlook opportunities for mutually beneficial partnerships that could support the university's development without jeopardizing its core academic mission. Professional reasoning here is that a balanced approach, involving thorough risk assessment and the development of robust mitigation strategies, is always preferable to an absolute rejection or an uncritical acceptance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying potential risks, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and developing appropriate mitigation strategies. Transparency with all stakeholders, including applicants and university administration, is crucial. Furthermore, seeking legal and ethical counsel when navigating complex sponsorship agreements is a vital step in ensuring compliance and maintaining professional standards. Question 12. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new AI-powered grading system for undergraduate engineering courses could significantly reduce faculty workload and potentially improve grading consistency. However, concerns have been raised regarding the system's potential biases, the security of student data, and its impact on the development of critical thinking skills through qualitative feedback. Considering the regulatory framework of Angarsk State Technical University, which approach best addresses the multifaceted implications of adopting this technology? Option A. Focus solely on the technical capabilities of the AI system, ensuring it meets the grading speed requirements, and deferring any ethical or data privacy concerns to the IT department for later review. Option B. Prioritize the immediate cost savings and efficiency gains, implementing the AI system with minimal additional oversight, assuming that any issues can be addressed reactively. Option C. Implement the AI system on a trial basis in a single department, without a formal impact assessment, to gauge student and faculty reaction before a wider rollout. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates potential biases, data security risks, pedagogical effects on critical thinking, and ensures full compliance with the federal law on education in the Russian Federation and the federal law on personal data. Developing mitigation strategies before implementation. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the immediate cost savings and efficiency gains, implementing the AI system with minimal additional oversight, assuming that any issues can be addressed reactively. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the potential benefits of a new technology against its inherent risks and the regulatory obligations of Angarsk State Technical University. The university, as an educational institution, has a duty of care to its students and staff, and must ensure that any technological implementation adheres to established safety, privacy, and ethical guidelines. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the cost-benefit, not just in financial terms, but also in terms of potential societal impact, educational efficacy, and compliance with relevant Russian Federation regulations governing educational institutions and data protection. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that goes beyond a simple financial cost-benefit analysis. This approach prioritizes a thorough evaluation of potential risks, ethical considerations, and compliance with the specific regulatory framework applicable to Angarsk State Technical University. This includes understanding and applying relevant articles of the federal law on education in the Russian Federation and the federal law on personal data, ensuring that any new technology respects student and staff privacy, data security, and does not introduce unforeseen pedagogical or ethical dilemmas. The focus is on proactive risk mitigation and ensuring alignment with the university's mission and legal obligations. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the immediate financial savings or perceived efficiency gains without adequately considering the broader implications. For instance, adopting a system that offers cost savings but compromises student data privacy would violate the federal law on personal data, which mandates strict controls over the collection, processing, and storage of personal information. Similarly, implementing technology that could potentially disadvantage certain student groups or create new forms of academic dishonesty, without a thorough assessment of these risks, would contravene the principles of equitable access and academic integrity enshrined in the federal law on education in the Russian Federation. Another failure would be to overlook the need for robust cybersecurity measures, which could expose the university to data breaches and reputational damage, violating general principles of institutional responsibility and potentially specific cybersecurity regulations. Professionals should approach such decisions by first identifying all relevant stakeholders and their concerns. This is followed by a systematic identification of potential impacts, both positive and negative, across various dimensions: financial, operational, pedagogical, ethical, legal, and reputational. A structured risk assessment matrix should be employed to evaluate the likelihood and severity of identified risks. Crucially, the assessment must be grounded in the specific legal and regulatory landscape of the Russian Federation, with particular attention to educational and data protection laws. Mitigation strategies for identified risks should be developed, and the overall feasibility and desirability of the technology should be evaluated against these comprehensive findings, ensuring that the proposed solution aligns with the university's strategic goals and ethical commitments. Question 13. When evaluating an applicant for admission to Angarsk State Technical University, whose academic transcript shows a GPA slightly below the stated minimum requirement, but who has provided a detailed explanation of extenuating circumstances that affected their performance during a specific academic period, which approach best aligns with the university's entrance examination framework? Option A. Immediately reject the applicant based on the GPA not meeting the minimum threshold, as per the stated admission criteria. Option B. Arbitrarily waive the GPA requirement for this applicant due to the provided explanation, without a formal process for such waivers. Option C. Inform the applicant that their GPA is too low and offer them the option to reapply in a future admission cycle after improving their academic record. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire application, including the explanation of extenuating circumstances, to assess their overall potential and suitability for admission, potentially considering alternative assessment methods if deemed appropriate by the admissions committee. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire application, including the explanation of extenuating circumstances, to assess their overall potential and suitability for admission, potentially considering alternative assessment methods if deemed appropriate by the admissions committee. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the applicant's prior academic record, while not meeting the explicit minimum requirements for direct admission, may contain mitigating factors or demonstrate potential that warrants further consideration. The challenge lies in balancing the university's established admission standards with the need for a fair and comprehensive assessment of each applicant, ensuring that no potentially strong candidate is overlooked due to a rigid interpretation of initial criteria. Angarsk State Technical University entrance exam regulations likely emphasize a holistic review process, particularly for applicants who may not fit a standard profile. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's entire application package, including any supplementary materials or explanations provided. This approach is justified by the principles of fairness and the potential for identifying candidates who, despite initial discrepancies, possess the aptitude and motivation to succeed at the university. The university's regulatory framework for entrance exams, as per the Angarsk State Technical University guidelines, would typically allow for exceptions or alternative assessment methods when specific circumstances warrant it, promoting a nuanced evaluation rather than a purely quantitative one. This ensures that the university attracts a diverse and capable student body. An incorrect approach would be to immediately reject the applicant based solely on the discrepancy in the GPA, without further investigation. This fails to adhere to the spirit of a comprehensive entrance examination process, which aims to assess potential beyond a single metric. It also risks overlooking valuable candidates who may have faced extenuating circumstances affecting their academic performance, but possess strong potential in other areas relevant to technical studies. Another incorrect approach would be to arbitrarily lower the GPA requirement for this specific applicant without a clear, documented rationale or a consistent policy for such adjustments. This would undermine the integrity and fairness of the admission process, potentially leading to accusations of favoritism or inconsistent application of standards. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a systematic and equitable evaluation. This involves first understanding the specific admission criteria and any provisions for exceptions or alternative assessments within the Angarsk State Technical University entrance exam regulations. Subsequently, they should gather all available information about the applicant, including academic transcripts, personal statements, letters of recommendation, and any other submitted documentation. The next step is to analyze this information in light of the university's goals and the applicant's demonstrated potential, considering any mitigating factors. Finally, a decision should be made based on a reasoned assessment, documented clearly, and in accordance with established university policies and ethical considerations. Question 14. The evaluation methodology shows that a proposed new interdisciplinary master's program at Angarsk State Technical University has generated significant initial student interest through informal surveys. However, the methodology has not yet comprehensively analyzed the program's long-term financial sustainability, the availability of qualified faculty across all contributing departments, or the potential impact on existing departmental resources and course offerings. Which of the following approaches to proceeding with the program's development represents the most professionally sound and compliant course of action for Angarsk State Technical University? Option A. Immediately proceed with detailed curriculum development and faculty recruitment, assuming the initial student interest will translate into sufficient enrollment and revenue to cover costs. Option B. Focus solely on refining the curriculum based on student feedback, deferring any detailed financial or operational planning until the program is closer to launch. Option C. Halt all further development until a comprehensive impact assessment is completed, covering academic viability, financial projections, operational feasibility, and potential risks and benefits in accordance with university planning guidelines. Option D. Delegate the financial sustainability and resource allocation aspects to the individual departments involved, trusting their judgment to manage the program within their existing budgets. The correct answer is A. Immediately proceed with detailed curriculum development and faculty recruitment, assuming the initial student interest will translate into sufficient enrollment and revenue to cover costs. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in assessing the impact of a proposed new academic program at Angarsk State Technical University. The core difficulty lies in balancing the potential benefits of innovation and student engagement with the university's established regulatory framework, resource allocation policies, and the need for a robust, evidence-based decision-making process. A superficial assessment risks overlooking critical factors, leading to misallocation of resources, potential noncompliance with internal university statutes, or failure to meet educational quality standards. Professional judgment is required to ensure the assessment is comprehensive, objective, and aligned with the university's strategic goals and operational constraints. Correct approach involves a multifaceted impact assessment that considers academic, financial, operational, and student-centric dimensions. This approach is right because it aligns with the principles of responsible academic planning and resource management, which are implicitly governed by the internal regulations and guidelines of Angarsk State Technical University. Such an assessment would typically require gathering data on potential student demand, faculty expertise, infrastructure requirements, projected enrollment, tuition revenue, and alignment with existing departmental strengths. This systematic evaluation ensures that decisions are informed, sustainable, and contribute positively to the university's mission. It adheres to the spirit of due diligence expected in academic governance, even if specific internal statutes are not explicitly cited in this context. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on projected student interest without considering financial viability or faculty capacity would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of comprehensive due diligence, potentially leading to a program that cannot be adequately supported, thus violating internal resource management policies and potentially compromising the quality of education offered. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings by proposing a program with minimal new resource allocation, even if it means compromising academic rigor or student learning outcomes, would also be flawed. This approach neglects the primary mandate of the university to provide high-quality education and research, potentially contravening internal quality assurance guidelines and the ethical obligation to students. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a small, unrepresentative group of stakeholders without systematic data collection would be professionally unsound. This method lacks objectivity and rigor, failing to provide a reliable basis for decision-making and potentially leading to decisions that are not in the best interest of the university or its students, thus undermining the principles of evidence-based governance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured impact assessment framework. This framework should begin with clearly defining the objectives of the proposed initiative. Subsequently, it requires identifying all relevant stakeholders and gathering their input. A critical step is the systematic collection and analysis of data across all relevant dimensions: academic, financial, operational, student impact. This data should then be used to evaluate potential risks and benefits, considering alignment with the university's strategic plan and regulatory environment. Finally, a well-reasoned recommendation should be formulated based on this comprehensive analysis, ensuring transparency and accountability throughout the process. Question 15. Analysis of the potential sponsorship of the Angarsk State Technical University entrance examination by a technology firm that also offers preparatory courses for the same examination. What is the most appropriate initial step to ensure the integrity of the admission process? Option A. Proceed with the sponsorship, but implement minimal disclosure measures regarding the firm's preparatory courses. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify potential conflicts of interest, evaluate risks to the examination's fairness, and propose mitigation strategies. Option C. Immediately accept the sponsorship to secure necessary funding for examination logistics. Option D. Reject the sponsorship offer due to the inherent conflict of interest without further investigation. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify potential conflicts of interest, evaluate risks to the examination's fairness, and propose mitigation strategies. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate need for funding and the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of the entrance examination process. The university administration's pressure to secure sponsorship from a company with potential conflicts of interest requires careful judgment to uphold academic standards and fairness. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective impact assessment that prioritizes the integrity of the entrance examination and the university's reputation. This approach requires identifying potential conflicts of interest, evaluating the risks to the examination's fairness and impartiality, and proposing mitigation strategies or recommending against the sponsorship if risks are unmanageable. This aligns with the Angarsk State Technical University's regulatory framework, which implicitly emphasizes academic integrity and ethical conduct in all university operations, including admissions and external partnerships. The university's charter and internal regulations would likely mandate adherence to principles of fairness and transparency, especially in processes that determine student admission. An incorrect approach would be to immediately accept the sponsorship without due diligence. This fails to acknowledge the potential for undue influence or bias in the examination process, violating the principle of equal opportunity for all applicants. Such a decision would likely contravene internal university policies on conflict of interest and ethical procurement, and could lead to reputational damage and legal challenges if the examination's fairness is compromised. Another incorrect approach would be to reject the sponsorship outright without a proper assessment. Caution is warranted. A blanket rejection without exploring potential mitigation strategies might unnecessarily forego a beneficial partnership. This could be seen as a failure to exercise professional judgment and explore all reasonable avenues, potentially impacting the university's financial stability or development opportunities, if such partnerships are permitted under strict ethical guidelines. A third incorrect approach would be to proceed with the sponsorship, but implement superficial measures to address conflicts of interest. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to genuine integrity and could be perceived as an attempt to circumvent ethical obligations. It fails to provide robust safeguards and leaves the examination vulnerable to perceived or actual bias. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. This includes 1. Identifying all stakeholders and their interests. 2. Defining the potential risks and their likelihood and impact. 3. Evaluating existing controls and their effectiveness. 4. Developing and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies. 5. Documenting the entire process and the rationale for the final decision. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-informed, defensible, and aligned with ethical and regulatory requirements. Question 16. Benchmark analysis indicates that a proposed revision to the Angarsk State Technical University entrance examination format is under consideration. Which of the following approaches to assessing the potential consequences of this revision best aligns with the principles of a thorough impact assessment within an academic and technical institution? Option A. Focusing exclusively on the potential for the revised format to increase the university's ranking in National League tables. Option B. Prioritizing an evaluation of the cost savings associated with implementing the new examination format. Option C. Gathering opinions from a small group of current faculty members about their initial impressions of the proposed changes. Option D. Conducting a detailed analysis of how the revised format might affect the academic preparedness of future student cohorts and the fairness of the selection process across different applicant backgrounds. The correct answer is D. Conducting a detailed analysis of how the revised format might affect the academic preparedness of future student cohorts and the fairness of the selection process across different applicant backgrounds. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of how to apply the principles of impact assessment within the specific regulatory context of the Angarsk State Technical University entrance exam framework. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate method for evaluating the potential consequences of a proposed change, ensuring that the chosen approach aligns with the university's established guidelines for such assessments, which are implicitly tied to the educational and research objectives of a technical university. Misinterpreting or misapplying these principles could lead to an incomplete or inaccurate evaluation, potentially affecting the validity of the entrance exam process itself. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of the potential effects of a proposed change on various stakeholders and systems relevant to the university's operations and academic mission. This requires identifying key areas of impact, defining metrics for measurement, and considering both positive and negative consequences. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core purpose of impact assessment, to provide a structured and evidence-based understanding of potential outcomes before a decision is made. Within the context of a university entrance exam, this translates to ensuring that any proposed changes to the examination process are thoroughly vetted for their effect on fairness, accessibility, and the overall quality of student selection, aligning with the university's commitment to academic integrity and meritocracy. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that focuses solely on the immediate financial implications of a proposed change, without considering broader academic or operational impacts, is incorrect. This fails to meet the comprehensive nature of impact assessment as required by a technical university's evaluation standards, which extend beyond mere cost-benefit analysis to encompass educational efficacy and student welfare. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal opinions, rather than structured data collection and analysis, is also incorrect. This violates the principle of evidence-based decision-making fundamental to academic and technical institutions. Such an approach lacks the rigor necessary for a credible impact assessment and could lead to biased conclusions. An approach that ignores potential negative consequences or focuses only on perceived benefits is fundamentally flawed. Impact assessment requires a balanced consideration of all potential outcomes, both positive and negative, to provide a complete picture for decision makers. Failing to do so undermines the integrity of the assessment and the decision-making process. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach impact assessment by first clearly defining the scope of the proposed change and the objectives of the assessment. They should then identify relevant stakeholders and potential areas of impact. A systematic methodology involving data gathering, analysis of potential positive and negative consequences, and consideration of mitigation strategies should be employed. The findings should be presented in a clear, objective, and comprehensive manner, allowing for informed decision-making. This process ensures that assessments are thorough, unbiased, and aligned with the overarching goals and ethical standards of the institution. Question 17. Compliance review shows that a candidate at the Angarsk State Technical University entrance exam was observed looking at their personal smartwatch during a section of the exam where only the provided examination booklet and writing materials were permitted. The candidate claims they were merely checking the time, as the exam room clock was not clearly visible. Which of the following approaches best reflects the required adherence to the Angarsk State Technical University entrance exam's regulatory framework? Option A. The candidate's action is a minor infraction that can be overlooked if the candidate's overall performance is strong, as the intent was not to cheat. Option B. The candidate's action is a violation of the exam rules, as smartwatches are considered electronic devices and are not permitted under any circumstances during the exam, regardless of the stated intent. Option C. The candidate's action is permissible if the exam proctor confirms that the room clock was indeed not visible, and the candidate can demonstrate they only checked the time. Option D. The candidate's action is permissible as long as the smartwatch was not used to access any external information or communicate with others. The correct answer is B. The candidate's action is a violation of the exam rules, as smartwatches are considered electronic devices and are not permitted under any circumstances during the exam, regardless of the stated intent. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the specific regulatory framework of the Angarsk State Technical University entrance exam, while also considering the ethical implications of their actions. The core of the challenge lies in accurately interpreting and applying the exam's guidelines to a novel situation, ensuring fairness and integrity. Careful judgment is required to avoid misinterpretations that could lead to procedural errors or unfair advantages. The correct approach involves a thorough and precise adherence to the Angarsk State Technical University entrance exam's stated guidelines regarding the use of external resources during the exam. This means understanding what constitutes permissible and impermissible assistance. The justification for this approach is rooted in the exam's fundamental purpose, to assess an individual's knowledge and abilities independently. Any deviation from the rules undermines this purpose, compromises the validity of the assessment, and violates the principles of academic integrity that are implicitly or explicitly part of any university's entrance examination framework. Specifically, the exam regulations likely stipulate that all work must be original and that no external aids beyond those explicitly permitted are allowed. An incorrect approach would be to assume that general knowledge about exam conduct applies, rather than strictly adhering to the Angarsk State Technical University entrance exam's specific rules. For instance, if the exam guidelines explicitly prohibit the use of any electronic devices not provided by the examination board, then using a personal smartphone, even for a quick, seemingly innocuous check, constitutes a regulatory failure. This is because it directly contravenes a specific prohibition, potentially providing an unfair advantage and compromising the integrity of the assessment process. Another incorrect approach would be to interpret the rules loosely, believing that minor deviations are acceptable. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the importance of strict adherence to examination protocols, which are designed to ensure a level playing field for all candidates. Such an interpretation can lead to accusations of cheating and can invalidate the candidate's results, regardless of intent. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multi-step approach. First, thoroughly review and understand all provided examination guidelines and regulations from the Angarsk State Technical University. Second, in case of any ambiguity, seek clarification from the examination proctors or administrators before the exam begins or at the earliest permissible opportunity. Third, err on the side of caution. If there is any doubt about the permissibility of an action or resource, do not engage with it. Fourth, focus solely on demonstrating one's own knowledge and abilities within the defined parameters of the examination. Question 18. Research into the potential impact of artificial intelligence on the future of civil engineering, as it relates to the curriculum and research focus of Angarsk State Technical University, should prioritize which of the following information-gathering strategies? Option A. Reviewing official Angarsk State Technical University publications, recent peer-reviewed articles in reputable engineering journals, and reports from established professional engineering associations. Option B. Accessing internal, unreleased research proposals from Angarsk State Technical University faculty and requesting proprietary data from leading construction firms without prior authorization. Option C. directly contacting Angarsk State Technical University professors and asking them to share their unpublished research findings and personal insights without a formal research request. Option D. Engaging in informal online forums and social media groups to gather opinions and anecdotal evidence from individuals claiming expertise in AI and civil engineering. The correct answer is A. Reviewing official Angarsk State Technical University publications, recent peer-reviewed articles in reputable engineering journals, and reports from established professional engineering associations. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of how to ethically and effectively gather information relevant to their potential academic pursuits at Angarsk State Technical University, specifically concerning the impact of emerging technologies on the engineering sector. The challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive research with the imperative to adhere to academic integrity and data privacy principles, even at the entrance exam stage. Careful judgment is required to select research methods that are both informative and ethically sound, avoiding any practices that could be construed as academic dishonesty or a violation of privacy. The correct approach involves utilizing publicly available, reputable sources and engaging in structured, ethical information gathering. This aligns with the principles of academic integrity expected of all students at Angarsk State Technical University. By focusing on official university publications, peer-reviewed academic journals, and reports from recognized professional engineering bodies, the applicant demonstrates a commitment to evidence-based research and a respect for intellectual property. This method ensures the information gathered is reliable, relevant, and obtained through legitimate channels, reflecting a mature and responsible approach to academic inquiry. An incorrect approach that relies on unauthorized access to internal university documents or proprietary industry data would be ethically unacceptable and potentially illegal. Such actions would violate academic integrity policies and could lead to severe consequences, including disqualification from the entrance exam. Another incorrect approach, such as directly soliciting confidential information from current faculty or students under the guise of a casual inquiry without proper disclosure or consent, would also be a breach of ethical conduct and privacy. This could undermine trust and create an unfair advantage. Furthermore, relying solely on unverified social media discussions or anecdotal evidence without cross-referencing with credible sources demonstrates a lack of critical thinking and academic rigor, failing to meet the standards of a technical university. Professionals should approach such research tasks by first clearly defining the scope of their inquiry. They should then identify the most appropriate and ethical sources of information, prioritizing official, academic, and peer-reviewed materials. Any engagement with individuals should be conducted with transparency, respect for privacy, and adherence to any relevant university or professional guidelines. A critical evaluation of all gathered information is paramount to ensure its accuracy and relevance. Question 19. Strategic planning requires a thorough evaluation of potential approaches to designing the Angarsk State Technical University entrance examination to ensure it aligns with the university's mission and regulatory framework. Which of the following approaches best reflects a responsible and compliant method for developing the examination strategy? Option A. Adopt examination formats and content that are familiar to the majority of local applicants, without investigating whether these formats might inadvertently disadvantage applicants from different educational backgrounds or regions. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the proposed examination structure and content, considering potential effects on diverse applicant groups and ensuring alignment with Russian educational laws and university guidelines. Option C. Focus on streamlining the examination process for administrative efficiency and cost reduction, with minimal consideration for the potential impact on applicant diversity or accessibility. Option D. Prioritize the development of the most academically challenging questions to identify the highest achieving students, assuming this inherently leads to a fair and equitable selection process. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the proposed examination structure and content, considering potential effects on diverse applicant groups and ensuring alignment with Russian educational laws and university guidelines. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because the university, as an educational institution, must balance its strategic goals with its ethical and regulatory obligations. The entrance exam is a critical gatekeeping mechanism, and its design and implementation must be fair, transparent, and aligned with the educational mission. The challenge lies in ensuring that the strategic planning process for the exam does not inadvertently lead to discriminatory practices or compromise the integrity of the assessment, which could have legal and reputational repercussions. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both effective for achieving university objectives and compliant with the principles of equitable education. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers potential unintended consequences on diverse applicant groups. This approach is right because it proactively identifies and mitigates risks of bias or exclusion, aligning with the principles of fairness and equal opportunity that are fundamental to educational institutions. Specifically, within the framework of Russian educational regulations and the Angarsk State Technical University's internal guidelines, such an assessment ensures compliance with laws promoting equal access to education and preventing discrimination. It also upholds the university's ethical commitment to providing a merit-based selection process. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on optimizing the exam for perceived academic rigor, without considering its broader impact risks, violating regulatory principles. For instance, if an approach prioritizes a narrow set of skills that are not universally taught or accessible, it could disproportionately disadvantage applicants from certain socioeconomic backgrounds or educational systems, thereby contravening the spirit of equal access to higher education enshrined in Russian law. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost-effectiveness or administrative ease over thoroughness in impact assessment would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the adoption of an exam that, while efficient to administer, fails to accurately measure the potential of a diverse applicant pool. Such a failure to conduct due diligence in assessing the exam's impact could result in a flawed selection process, undermining the university's credibility and potentially leading to challenges based on unfair assessment practices, which are subject to oversight by educational authorities in Russia. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured evaluation of all potential approaches. This includes 1. Clearly defining the strategic objective for the exam. 2. Identifying all relevant regulatory requirements and ethical considerations. 3. Brainstorming multiple approaches to achieve the objective. 4. For each approach, conducting a thorough impact assessment, considering potential benefits and risks, particularly concerning fairness, equity, and compliance. And 5. Selecting the approach that best balances strategic goals with regulatory and ethical imperatives, prioritizing fairness and integrity. Question 20. Comparative studies suggest that universities often face financial pressures. In the context of the Angarsk State Technical University entrance examination, if a technology company offers significant sponsorship for the examination process, what is the most appropriate approach to ensure the integrity and fairness of the admissions? Option A. Reject all forms of external sponsorship for the entrance examination to completely eliminate any perceived conflict of interest, regardless of the potential benefits to the university. Option B. Implement a disclosure policy where the sponsorship is publicly announced, but no specific measures are taken to alter the examination's design or administration beyond standard procedures. Option C. Accept the sponsorship immediately to alleviate financial pressures, with a general assurance from the sponsoring company that they will not interfere with the examination process. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify and mitigate any potential risks of bias or undue influence on the examination content, administration, and evaluation, ensuring strict adherence to university regulations and relevant Russian Federation laws governing educational institutions. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to identify and mitigate any potential risks of bias or undue influence on the examination content, administration, and evaluation, ensuring strict adherence to university regulations and relevant Russian Federation laws governing educational institutions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate need for funding and the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of the entrance examination process. The university's financial situation creates pressure to accept external sponsorship, but this must be balanced against the paramount importance of fairness, transparency, and the prevention of undue influence on the examination. Adherence to the Angarsk State Technical University's internal regulations and the broader legal framework governing educational institutions in the Russian Federation is critical. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that prioritizes the examination's integrity and fairness above all else. This means meticulously evaluating any potential sponsorship to identify and mitigate risks of bias, conflicts of interest, or any perception of impropriety. The assessment must consider how sponsorship might influence question design, examination administration, or the evaluation of candidates. This aligns with the ethical principles of academic integrity and the regulatory requirement for educational institutions to maintain impartial admission processes. Specifically, it would involve consulting the university's charter, internal policies on sponsorship and examinations, and relevant federal laws concerning education and public institutions, ensuring that any sponsorship agreement explicitly safeguards the examination's independence. An incorrect approach would be to accept sponsorship without a rigorous assessment, driven solely by the university's financial needs. This fails to uphold the principle of fairness and could lead to accusations of favoritism or compromised examination standards, violating the trust placed in the university by prospective students and the public. Another incorrect approach would be to implement superficial mitigation measures that do not genuinely address the potential for influence, such as merely disclosing the sponsorship without altering examination procedures. This approach is ethically deficient as it creates a false sense of security while the underlying risks remain. A third incorrect approach would be to reject all forms of sponsorship outright, even those that could be structured to pose no threat to examination integrity. While cautious, this may unnecessarily limit the university's resources and its ability to enhance educational offerings, provided that sponsorship can be secured in a manner that unequivocally protects the examination process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all stakeholders and their interests. Next, they must thoroughly understand the relevant regulatory framework and internal university policies. A risk-based assessment should then be conducted, identifying potential threats to the examination's integrity. Mitigation strategies should be developed and evaluated for their effectiveness. Finally, a decision should be made based on a comprehensive evaluation of the risks, benefits, and ethical considerations, ensuring that the chosen course of action aligns with the university's mission and legal obligations.